At 77, no one's calling Joe Biden the comeback kid, but he is implausibly back from the political dead. And perhaps even more implausibly, now the youngest man left in the Democratic race.
Thanks to the heart of the Democratic Party in South Carolina, I'm very much alive.
That massive win in South Carolina started Democrat dominoes falling. One by one, the main challengers on the moderate side of the contest have dropped out and now back him.
Today, I am ending my campaign and endorsing Joe Biden for president.
Mr. Biden's message is that now only he can stop Bernie Sanders, a self-declared Democratic socialist, becoming the nominee.
The talk of revolution isn't changing anyone's life right now. The fact is, you need real results, and we need them now.
For Senator Sanders, this is confirmation that he's the outsider, the man to scare the status quo.
Let's go outside.
I think it's no secret that the establishment is getting very nervous, whether it is the corporate wing of the Democratic Party or the political leadership. And the argument that we can't beat Trump is absolutely wrong.
As evidence, the Sanders campaign points to the many problems America faces. The fact that California, home to some of the world's richest companies, can't find a home for so many. And the fact that so many Americans, even with jobs, fear one piece of bad luck will send them spiraling into poverty. Is, they ask, someone like Joe Biden, Obama's vice president, so identified with the past, really the man to address these fears for the future? Zach Exley helped run Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign. He's since co-founded the Justice Democrats, aimed at getting more progressive candidates elected.
That's what's driving all this upheaval in American politics, including Trump and Bernie. And that's what drove the Obama phenomenon. In 2008, Barack Obama was somebody who spoke to these problems. Then when he became president, he kind of stopped talking about it, right? And suddenly, you know, he became another status quo politician who was just happy with how things were because he had been president for a while. So things better have been nice, right? This is why Hillary Clinton lost, because she was trying to run on that record.
Here's the scary truth.
But there is another name in the contest. Mike Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York, is on the ballot for the first time on Super Tuesday. He spent an almost unimaginable $500 million so far, mostly on TV ads.
I'm Mike Bloomberg, and I approve this message.
He has staked his entire campaign on the idea that if he can get into people's living rooms via television ads, particularly in as costly a market as California, that they will choose to vote for him.
But according to Mike Bloomberg and his website, he's not just buying ads, he's running a real ground campaign too, with 20 offices and 800 staff in California alone. So let's track some down. According to the website, volunteers and staff are making campaign calls in this office in Stockton right now.
Hello? Hello? Not only is there no phone banking apparently going on, there's nobody here at all.
I tried another office in a nearby town and found much the same thing.
There's nothing. Nothing.
There's also supposed to be Bloomberg volunteers and staff campaigning at the farmers market in Salinas.
We're looking for Mike Bloomberg, his stand, his campaign. Is it here?
It's not here. You're only the second person to approach me about that today. One other lady told me she was going to be a volunteer at their booth today, and there is no booth, so she ended up going home.
And there was no one, too, at the nearby campaign office in Carmel. Mike Bloomberg, it seems, wants us to think he has a ground campaign in California without really having one.
Hello?
There's nobody here.
Political science research has told us that it's not enough to portray yourself as an option for the voters, but you have to have some real enthusiasm and support in order to have successful candidacy. So it's a really exciting opportunity for political scientists to see a test in real life of what happens when money is the primary campaign tool.
We don't have long to wait for that answer, and by tomorrow we'll have a good idea which vision America's Democrats are lining up with.
That's David Grossman. We're joined now by the former Republican speechwriter David Frum, who now writes for The Atlantic, and Crystal Ball, who's a presenter on Hill TV, author of The Populist Guide to 2020. And it was interesting hearing David speak about enthusiasm in his piece, and we'll come on to what that means in this race now. But let me just turn to the last 48 hours. Does it feel to you it is now a two-horse race? And was that orchestrated from the moment that Biden did so well in South Carolina?
Yeah, I think it absolutely was. I mean, you have a segment of the Democratic electorate that has been looking to see who is the establishment going to get behind, who is the media going to get behind to say this is the person to defeat Donald Trump. And basically, Joe Biden was the last person standing. I mean, considering he's the former vice president, it's actually remarkable that there wasn't more establishment lined up behind him. I mean, Barack Obama, the president, has still not endorsed him. But once he won South Carolina and they saw this as the absolute last possible moment to stop Bernie Sanders, then everybody got in behind him.
So, looking at this from a Republican point of view, the Democratic Party is not like the Republican Party. The Republican Party is quite a coherent, highly ideological organization. The Democratic Party, which is potentially bigger, but is a much looser coalition of the center, of the left, of even some elements of conservatism. And the Sanders challenge has been that he is a candidate of a sect within a much larger coalition, and he's also a candidate who says things must radically change at a time when most Americans, 60% of Americans, think the economy is pretty good.
Sect is a very provocative word to use, and I imagine a lot of people who've followed him, not just this time round, but 4 years ago, were saying, why don't you listen to where the noise is? Why don't you listen to where the enthusiasm's coming from?
Well, first, as we saw in South Carolina, Black America, which is the base of the Democratic Party, has a lot of enthusiasm for Joe Biden. I think you'll see that in Virginia tonight. And secondly, you only get to vote. Every vote counts the same. Whether the vote is cast with enthusiasm or whether it's cast grudgingly, it counts one.
On the other hand, if you ask voters who they trust most on the issues, which goes against David's idea that this is a sect, they routinely say on healthcare, on climate change, on the economy, they trust Bernie Sanders the most. The big concern has been over decades, you've had Democrats and the media telling voters you have to vote for the right-leaning most candidate, for the conservative candidate within the Democratic Party in order to win. So there are lingering concerns about whether he could in fact defeat Donald Trump. And so that has been the really deciding factor here in these last days.
Isn't the flaw, David, that when you say people only vote once, the alternative is they don't vote at all? Right. And Bernie Sanders tells you that he's the one that gets new voters out, that might, wave goodbye to the lingering Republicans, but he gets the young voters out. Is that...
Except we've tested that, and it's not true. The young voters don't care. Joe Biden appeals to people who pay their cable bills on the day it arrives. Bernie Sanders appeals to people who may forget to pay the cable bill entirely. And the first group, they're both equally morally worthy, but the first group are more reliable. And so what we're...
As voters or as bill payers?
And one of the things that is very much on the minds of Democrats, and in my writing I've encouraged them to understand this, is when should it be Bernie Sanders who runs against Donald Trump, it's not just the White House is at risk, but it's the House of Representatives.
There's no evidence to support.
Well, here's the evidence. That there are 41 Democrats who have seats that Donald Trump won. There are 3 Republicans who have seats that Hillary Clinton won. Of the 41 Democrats who hold seats that in Trump territory, 21 are freshmen. It takes 19 to change the House. There is a real risk with Bernie Sanders that if he does badly in places like...
but because he's an independent or because he's a democratic socialist?
Here's the problem with that analysis. I mean, first of all, Democrats tried that model last time with Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton is not in the White House. So that model has already been proven to fail. Second of all, look, you're not comparing Bernie Sanders versus God, you're comparing him to Joe Biden, a man who, has trouble putting a sentence together, has been incredibly weak in terms of his debate performance, is going to get decimated by Donald Trump in terms of personal corruption.
When you talk about putting a sentence together,
yes,
you're referring to kind of, the sort of worst kept secret that people worry that he's kind of slightly losing the plot a bit, or he's too old.
He's not the person that he once was. And there's a reason why he fell flat in the early states and had to be resuscitated essentially in South South Carolina. There's a reason why Barack Obama didn't jump in behind him. There's a reason why the establishment waited to see which way the chips are going to fall. He is an incredibly weak candidate to go against Donald Trump.
They're all old. We don't want to judge anybody's mortality. All the candidates are closer to 80 than they are to 75, or all the male candidates are closer to 80 than to 75.
Donald Trump is now the youngest male in the race, right?
And all of them are older than Bill Clinton.
Let me just talk, because we've treated this as if it is a two-horse race. It isn't, of course. There is still Mike Bloomberg, who hasn't actually been on the ballot yet. He's spent billions on the TV advertising, radio advertising. Is he going to shake up the whole...
Elizabeth Warren is still in the race too.
And Elizabeth Warren, of course, on the Bernie side of things. So is Bloomberg, can he buy this way through?
It doesn't look like he's going to do well in California. He may do well in Florida when it's Florida's turn. But at some level, the math, the accumulated math. Some people may remember when the states voted winner take all, but these are now proportional representation. So once somebody gets a lead, it's very hard to reverse it by winning big somewhere down the road.
And you can't buy love.
Right.
You can't buy love. I mean, that's the bottom line. His rise was a statement on the weakness of Joe Biden. Now that Biden has consolidated that support, the rationale for his candidacy is over.
Very briefly, Elizabeth Warren, will she split the Bernie vote now, the Sanders vote?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is the moderates consolidating and the progressives now split. And she has no path to the nomination, so there's a lot of pressure on her, especially her home state votes tonight. She may well lose there. If she does, I don't see her continuing.
Thank you very much indeed.